Regardless of your perspective, Harvard's looking pretty bad right now, although I think that's actually great for America. I'm Allison Schrager, and I'm a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Claudine Gay has fulfilled the shortest tenure as a Harvard president in history. She only lasted 6 months, and the last couple months have been particularly tough on her. There was a lot of criticism of how she handled the October 7th attacks in Israel, and then...
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
And then there were a lot of accusations of plagiarism. And it seemed to be at that point that she couldn't lead the institution anymore, and she ended up resigning after just 6 months. So mistakes were definitely made. But I am sympathetic to the view that in some ways this was a lot bigger than her. And in a lot of ways, she was set up to fail. Maybe not in the way you think, but really the problem has become the way Harvard has cast itself as this big cultural icon, the shaper of the elite. And once you put yourself in that role, whoever leads the institution is always going to be a target. Let me explain. So, thinking about this like an economist, it really comes down to signaling. Signaling is a very powerful force in economics, and it comes down to when you hire someone, you don't really know, how productive or how good they're going to be in a job. So you look for certain signals that help you anticipate what you're going to get. And there's actually a big debate in economics about whether or not colleges signal sort of maturity or responsibility, or whether or not they actually impart any real skills. So signaling from elite schools like Harvard is even more powerful, because it suggests that if you went to Harvard, you are among the best and the brightest of your generation, or at the very least, are really well connected. For signaling to work and for that signaling to persist, it really also has to have value. You have to actually keep hiring people from Harvard and observe that they are better employees than the rest. So does college actually have economic value? This is a very controversial issue. Some people think just going to college doesn't really have any intrinsic value, but just the fact you went signals all these wonderful things about your character, your discipline. Other people think you actually learn valuable things in college that make you a better employee. I'm actually more inclined to the latter point of view. I think that college does have value. I think it does impart a lot of skills. I think it values a lot of maturity. And I think we see this in the college wage premium, that people get paid more if they've gone to college. Not only do they get paid more, but over the course of their lifetime, their wages grow much, much faster, which to me suggests that there is some skill development that goes on. Ivy League schools take on an extra signaling value, again, because they're so hard to get into. So either you're brilliant or you're well connected. And this signal has taken on a lot more value in recent decades because of a lot of changes in the economy. Specifically, there's something called the superstar effect that economists have observed, that certain people earn way, way more than everyone else, and they're in certain jobs that just make them fabulously wealthy. Now, the evidence suggests that on average, if you go to an elite school versus, say, a state school, you will earn about the same. But if you do go to an elite school, your odds of getting into that very top tier, that superstar, are much higher. So that is why the signal from Harvard has become just super valuable and super desirable, because if you do go to an elite school, your odds of being in the 1% are much better. So this was a very powerful position to be in, was to be signaling your way into the 1%. But it turned out to really backfire for Harvard and a lot of other elite universities. Because I said, there's a limited number of them by definition. And so they're effectively acting as what we call in economics an oligopoly, which effectively unchecked market power. The ability to confer this very valuable signal turned out to be very toxic for Harvard and other elite schools. And we know from economics, when you have this all-powerful oligopoly, particularly one that's in the business of conferring wealth and privilege, then that can corrupt the institution. And all of a sudden the institution starts seeing itself as not just producing research and education, but really sort of a great social project that is sort of determining and curating our nation's elite. And it's hard not to honestly then start getting a little high on your supply and start feeling like it is your mission to handpick who those people are going to be. And at that point, you sort of start getting away from the university's core mission, which is scholarship and merit. And then all of a sudden as well, you become subject to a lot more criticism and a lot more scrutiny, because who are you to be making these choices? So how do we solve this problem for Harvard and America? It might sound counterintuitive. I think the best thing that happened for Harvard is the fact it looks a little diminished right now. which means its signal, this special signal, sort of the sheen has run off it a little bit. And I think that's actually the best, because Harvard can go back to what Harvard is good at, which is great research, great scholarship, and sort of really great education, rather than feeling like they are the ones tasked with shaping the elite, because America has a lot of great universities with a lot of really talented students and faculty all over the place. And if we just put less value on this small handful of universities, that would be better for everyone.